Anything that comes to mind that you would take care not to do again, or maybe do different if you were going back and doing things over again?
I mean, this was kind of like in the conversation with us before this, we were talking about like in the realm of regrets. And I mean, the things probably that I would do differently is I would desire to have and want to have more patience and handle certain situations, better. And
like patience at bedtime.
Yes.
Sure.
We have patience at bedtime for 2 hours every single night. There's got to be a better way, dude.
It does. I mean,
man.
Hang on.
Yeah, I would say those are the things. I'm so grateful that there's nothing that ever happened between us as husband and wife that I regret or like wish that we could go back and change. I mean, I'm thankful that God has given us the ability to navigate our difficulties and challenges in a way that, didn't result in anything massive and major. But yeah, along the way, you can remember, like as a parent, like losing your cool, being impatient, just losing perspective, taking that out on them. And those are probably the things that I,
So basically we regret being sinners.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I this is something that for me, like that I had to learn about myself was that like if the kids would get hurt, like if we were on a walk or riding bikes and they would get hurt, fall over, scrape their knee, whatever, I would get irritated. I could definitely feel myself getting irritated in those moments. Too. Yeah. And of course, as I sit here and talk about it, I'm like, well, that's, where's the compassion? Where's that virtue, right? And that when someone's hurt and then the person who's coming to help them is kind of upset with them, that's a bad vibe. Yeah. Generally speaking. And, and so, yeah, right. And of course the kids, they're like, what? I don't understand. Like I'm hurt and you're angry that I fell off my, whatever. But, Mika was very persistently and kindly like reflecting that back to me. Like, why do you get this way? And I really had to like just do some examination. And what I finally came up with is this realization that I am so dedicated back to what does it mean to be a parent? I'm so dedicated and focused on their safety and well-being. Like there's a part of my identity as a man that's really wound up in the success of that. So when that happens, even those little spaces, it's like in my own kind of sinful distortion, I feel all this shame and like I have failed in my role here. And what they get is that self-loathing coming back to them. They see that coming back at them. They feel that, which is terrible. That's not a good way to parent. And for me, like just that confession, like even on my very best day, I can't give them everything they need, and the kind of the way that I just kept sort of working this out in my own self was like, even on my very best day, I'm a lousy version of Jesus,
Right.
And so it's like, eventually I realized my own limitation there as a parent. Like, I can't always keep you safe. And when you get hurt, instead of taking that personal and seeing that through the lens of my failure, which is a really selfish way to process that, I need to have compassion and come alongside of you. What do you need from me? How can I help? That's just like my own work and as a person and, God working on me. And so I think I'm thankful that was happening when the kids were young, because when they get older, that's even more, I feel that it's even more pronounced, that struggle.
The struggle of realizing that you can't make them be perfect.
Yeah. It's like,
is that what you're saying?
I mean, essentially it's like, as the older, the older the kids get, the less control you have over more things. And so as you're losing control, as you're realizing the facade of control is falling away, what are you left with? You're left with, ways of influencing them, being connected with them, being present with them. But if you're still holding on to, I want to control for these outcomes, I mean, you're just going to be a miserable person.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I noticed recently that the things that are bothering me is because I thought it should be done better. And then I was thinking, well, if they did it better, would that be good enough? And then I'm like, no, it needs to be perfect, basically. And then I was thinking, this is literally what I was thinking to myself, is like, I've been chewing about this in my mind a little bit, because I've been sort of like making, I don't know, just processing it and like knowing that it's not right, but acknowledging it like it's the thought that I have, which is like, you got to be perfect or people die. That's what I've been thinking. But most of the time, that's not the case. That is the case sometimes, but most of the time, no one's going to die, But it's like this internal thing. You got to be perfect or people die.
Yeah. There's like in counseling, which is what I do, there's a school of thought called internal family systems, IFS. And the internal family idea there is that you have these different parts. All of us have these different parts that make up who we are as a person. And at certain times, in certain situations with certain people, those different parts become more pronounced. Maybe like you have a part that's a real protector of yourself and others. And sometimes that part carries a burden that's not realistic. It's not rational. And it can actually drive them to become a really lousy version of yourself. And so really becoming aware of how certain situations elicit and evoke responses kind of out of these parts of you. In these situations, this part of me really comes out, is kind of what that school of thought. And it helps you to really understand, like, these parts of me is definitely a part of who I'm as a whole person. God's redeeming and saving every part of me, as it were. And so all of those are coming into submission and salvation. And again, it's like a great thing to be a protector of your family. That's a high value. You should aspire to that. But there's a way of going about doing that that's Christ-centered, that is still has humility in that strength,
Yep.
And that's something I had to, as a dad, really had to learn to do. And unfortunately, you're learning to do that in places where you're the people you love are the people you're hurting and you're learning with. It's just sort of tied up in the whole process.
Yep. I first heard about internal family systems a few years ago through Tim Ferriss's podcast.
Yeah.
And it was very helpful for him. And as he processed childhood trauma and stuff. And is the big idea there that internally you have various almost like personalities or like a family inside, and it depends what you're encountering. It affects different members of the family inside of you. Is that where it gets
that's
the
kind of the idea of it.
System?
Yeah, that's in the external family. In that school of thought would be basically what you call your family. So your immediate family, your extended family. Okay. But the internal family is, because the idea is like in like how a regular family, an external family, everybody kind of plays different roles and parts. And the idea is to blend those in a really healthy way where people are loved and appreciated for the things that they bring. You're kind of doing that with these different parts of yourself. And so that's kind of the premise of it. Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting way of thinking about it. And it kind of helps you to generate as a parent, like just the sense of compassion for yourself. You have to, I have this part of me. Sometimes it really gets the best of me. It's not always great. Thank you for being patient with me. I need to be patient with myself. I'm still learning and growing. You know what I'm saying? So you're kind of blending, bringing that hope and faith and love to bear in all those different intricacies of your personality and who you are. Yeah.
So are you saying the internal family is like the negative parts of you, or not necessarily?
No, the famous statement in IFS, in that school of thought, is there's no bad parts. There's actually a book called No Bad Parts. And so the idea is in the sense of like they're mostly like not functioning very well. They might be stuck, There's like in our life, we developmentally, we might get stuck at certain sections in our life and different struggles and trauma, and it brings out certain parts of us that kind of are underdeveloped. and they're not really blended well in our whole being, right? And so part of the therapy is to really to do work with those parts of ourselves so that, you know, Christ in us really is manifesting in all these different aspects. You know, I have this really gentle, caring, compassionate part. I have this really strong, protective, you know, demonstrative part, and really bringing a balance and a whole to that, you know, through the work that God's doing in our life. So yeah, it's really fascinating. It wasn't developed by a Christian, you know, thinker or therapist or counselor, but a lot of, you know, I know a lot of believers who are really good therapists who use IFS, you know, in their work as counselors. It can be really helpful.
In my internal family, I have this really nasty, passive aggressive, cynical, negative aunt who speaks way too much. I got to do some work on that.
Yeah, no.
I don't have any of those in my external family, but my internal family.
You do? Yeah.
Yeah.